The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. What a day. And all in all, the Savior, the Protector, the Unifier, the Messiah, the King of Kings, the Most Loved, Captain Ibrahim Traore, is being recognized globally. People are seeing the good things that he's doing. He is rewriting history. For decades, the way we have partnered with other people and allow other people to have their way, he's changing the narrative. And it's not only Africa that is noticing. People outside of the black skin are seeing what this our all in all is doing. According to this Frenchman, Captain Ibrahim Traore has brought a different dimension into African politics, changing the narrative, moving with the revolutionary power. And that Captain Ibrahim Traore is doing everything possible to set the rules. And with the rules, it's either you join or you move out. And otherwise isn't ready to go by what our all in us are doing. And we've seen the tactics that they have used all these years on them, and it's not succeeding. And they will never get tired. That they always want to have their way when it comes to Africa. But Captain Ibrahim Traore is setting the rules. And people like China, Russia, Turkey are ready to go by our rules and regulations. These people always believe that when it comes to Africa, we do not have a say. They have to always decide what they think is right for us.
Ibrahim Traore no longer plays the role of military leader. He now targets the economic order. This is not a nuance. It is a qualitative transformation of the conflict between Africa and the West. Traore accelerates the renegotiation of mining contracts in Burkina Faso, increases the state's share in gold mines and strategic resources, and uses explicitly anti-French language focused on economic colonialism and Pan-African sovereignty. Official statements speak of economic reform, but behind the scenes, tough negotiations with Western companies are underway. And if this model is imitated in Mali, Niger, Guinea, the Africa Western Economic Order wavers in succession. This analysis will show you why this maneuver is much bigger than it seems. Firstly, Traore is doing something for the first time. He is not just taking on the role of a military coup leader, he is becoming a revolutionary targeting the economic order inherited from colonization. Secondly, gold is not just one resource among others. It is the dollar system. It is the balance of reserves of Western central banks. These are corporate interests that generate billions in profits. Thirdly, the alliance of the Sahel states creates coordination that protects its maneuvers. If Mali, Niger, and Burkina move together, the West cannot respond effectively. And fourthly, Western media use the label military junta to make Traore's economic maneuvers invisible, thus avoiding creating the sympathy that a new Lumumba would generate. Let's start with what Traore is concretely doing. Burkina Faso is speeding up the revision of mining contracts signed decades ago, contracts that give the Burkinabe state a minimal share of the revenues, often 10% or less, while foreign companies take 90% of the profits from gold exploitation. Traore now says no, we want to increase the state's share. We want to renegotiate. And if the companies refuse, we have other options: nationalizations, expulsion, replacement with partners who accept the new conditions. Russia, China, Turkey are ready to accept conditions that Western companies refuse. So Traore has leverage, he is not isolated, he has alternatives, and Western companies know it. And the language used is revolutionary, not technocratic. Economic colonialism, these words are deliberately chosen because they resonate with African populations who,
not only Burkinabe or Sahelian, it is a call that crosses borders. And Traore thus builds a legitimacy that goes beyond Burkina Faso. positioning himself as the leader who dares to say what many think, but dare not express, "Our resources belong to us. We will no longer be exploited." Sovereignty begins with economic control. And now, the historical dimension. This pattern is not new. Patrice Lumumba did it in Congo in 1960. Targeting Belgian control of mining resources. Assassinated 6 months after his election. Thomas Sankara did it in Burkina Faso itself in 1983, nationalizing resources and reducing dependence on French companies. Assassinated in 1987. Muammar Gaddafi did it in Libya, nationalizing oil. Killed in 2011. The pattern is clear. African leaders who target the order economic do not generally survive long, either overthrown by coups or assassinated, or destroyed by economic sanctions that make their country ungovernable. And Traore knows this history. He knows what happened to Lumumba, to Sankara, to Gaddafi. And he does what he does anyway. But what makes the current situation different is the regional context. Traore is not alone. The alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso now form a coordinated bloc that has left ECOWAS and can coordinate not only military policies, but also economic policies. If Traore increases the state's share in gold mines in Burkina Faso, Mali can do the same with its own mines. Niger can do the same. And if these 3 countries move together, it is much harder for Western companies to retaliate. They cannot sanction 3 countries simultaneously without massive loss. They cannot organize 3 coups at the same time. They cannot assassinate 3 leaders simultaneously. Coordination creates structural protection. And now, the stakes for the West gold is not simply an extractive resource among others. It is a strategic asset that underpins the global financial system. Western central banks hold gold as the ultimate reserve. The dollar system relies partly on gold as a guarantee of last resort, and Western mining companies generate billions in profits from the exploitation of African gold. If Africa begins to renegotiate mining contracts en masse, 3 structural consequences occur. First, corporate profits collapse. If the state's share goes from 10% to 50%, companies lose 40% of their revenue and certain operations become unprofitable, forcing withdrawals. Second, gold supply becomes complicated. If African countries nationalize or expel Western companies and replace them with Russian or Chinese partners, the West loses control of the supply chain. Third, the precedent becomes dangerous. If Burkina Faso succeeds, other countries will try, not only in the Sahel, but in Central Africa, in East Africa, wherever there is gold, copper, cobalt, uranium. And now, the Western media response. A strategic invisibilization. Western media systematically used the label military junta for Traore, which produces 2 effects. First, it delegitimizes. Junta means illegitimate. Military means undemocratic. So everything Traore does becomes automatically suspect. Second, it makes economic maneuvers invisible. When the media talk about Traore, they talk about security, coups d'état, violence, but never about renegotiating mining contracts or economic sovereignty. This invisibilization is strategic, because if Western media told the economic story of a young African leader taking back control of his country's resources from Western companies, it would create sympathy. This story resonates with African populations, with populations of the global South, even with certain Western populations who criticize extractive capitalism. So, Western media avoid this story and prefer the narrative of the unstable military leader. And the parallel with Lumumba becomes relevant. Patrice Lumumba became an icon in Africa, not because he won, but because he dared to say that Congo's resources belong to Congo. Defying Belgium, speaking of economic sovereignty, his death created a symbol of resistance, dignity, refusal. of exploitation. And now, Western media do not want to create a new Lumumba. They do not want to create a martyr or a symbol. So they try to present Traore as something different. Not a revolutionary or a hero, just a military strongman or an authoritarian leader. This narrative is an attempt to control the story before it becomes uncontrollable. And escalation 75% probability within 24 to 72 hours. 3 possible triggers. First, a Western mining company engages in an open standoff, refuses to renegotiate, threatens to withdraw, mobilizes lobbies to press its government to intervene. This public standoff forces Traore to show his strength with a nationalization or an expulsion, creating a precedent that makes other countries bolder. Secondly, threat of sanctions. If a Western government threatens Burkina Faso with economic sanctions because of mining renegotiations, this transforms the conflict from a confrontation between Traore and private companies into a confrontation between Traore and states, creating a dynamic of national sovereignty, where Burkinabe populations rally behind Traore and other African countries, see this confrontation and pick their side. Thirdly, coup d'état or assassination attempt against Traore. If accusations emerge that a coup or an assassination attempt was organized against Traore because of his economic maneuvers, this immediately activates the parallel with Lumumba and Sankara, creating a massive mobilization because African populations know this history and know what happens to leaders who defy the economic order. And Traore's allies Russia, Wagner, China, Turkey are not motivated by altruism, but see a geopolitical opportunity. If the West loses control of African resources, someone else will control them, and they want to be that someone else. So, they offer Traore what the West cannot offer. No political conditions, no lessons on democracy, no sermons on human rights, just business. And Traore uses this competition, but puts them in competition. If French companies do not want to renegotiate, Russian companies will do it. If Canadian companies leave, Chinese companies come. This competition gives Traore a power that no African leader has had for decades. The power to choose, the power to say no, the power to negotiate. And now the domino effect. If Traore succeeds in renegotiating mining contracts without being overthrown or killed, Mali is watching, Niger is watching, Guinea is watching, and they see that it is possible, that the economic order can be challenged, that contracts inherited from the colonial era can be renegotiated, that economic sovereignty is not just a slogan, but an achievable policy. And if these countries follow, the domino effect begins. Not just gold, but copper, cobalt, uranium, oil. All African resources currently exploited under unfavorable contracts become targets for renegotiation. And if this happens on a large scale, the Africa West economic order wavers, Western companies lose their preferential access, prices rise, supply chains reorganize, and the West loses a strategic advantage it has maintained for centuries. And the generational dimension. Traore is 37 years old. He represents a generation that is not afraid, that has no nostalgia for the old order, that owes nothing to the elites who collaborated with the West for decades. This generation looks at history and draws different conclusions. It does not ask for permission. It does not negotiate politely. It demands, and it is ready to take risks that the previous generation was not ready to take. And this generation is not alone in Burkina Faso. It exists across Africa, in young military officers, in Mali, in Niger, in Guinea, in young activists in Kenya, in Nigeria, in South Africa, all sharing a frustration.
Look at the percentage that we get at the end of the day. When we partner with them, they take out the greater portion. And these are the things Captain Ibrahim Traore is stopping. making sure that whatever that is in our soil benefits us. Because we have the resources, yet we are poor. People come into the continent and carry everything away. Whatever that is here doesn't benefit us. We are always watching over our resources for people to come in and carry them away. These are leaders the African Union is not seeing, but people who are even outside of the skin color. The same French people that are after Africa are the same people that are recognizing the things that are all in us are doing in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And for how long will we continue to please the people that are after us, that are making sure Africa do not rise up? We need to understand that we are the only people that can set ourselves free. And if we don't value ourselves, see what we have, and believe in ourselves, there is nobody that can. Like we are seeing happening currently in Africa. The same people that are preaching the African solution to the African problem are the same ones that are calling these people into Africa to come and set us free, to come and help us fight. Fight what? Because Africa is not at war. These people also have their own individual problems. But the leaders under the system called democracy always want to present themselves to these people as if the African isn't capable of doing anything. We hear the big grammar they give us when they meet in their summit. Is it African Union? Is it United Nations? But these people will never do anything that we think is going to change. They are always active in speech and not in ways. And I hope our leaders are watching and listening to how people are seeing these leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, because these are the people that are only giving us the freedom that we are looking for. They are changing the narrative. How do we have our resources and people determine what the Africans should be getting? At the end of the day, we are getting 5%, 6%, 7%, and these leaders are claiming we should hail them. For what reason? And for how long will we continue to allow these things to be happening? Is it about talking? We have had enough of the speech. We want all of you to learn from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These leaders are doing everything good. These people are doing everything right. And that is why we are seeing them chasing after them. And even their own people cannot just keep mute. They are telling us the good things that these people are doing in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and how they are able to beat the games of these people. They always try to make sure the African never rises. They always try to make sure that we continue to be at the bottom. And it is our leaders that are allowing these things to go on. But this is the time for us all to come together united. And we need to understand that if we continue to allow these people to play on our intelligence, we can never go far. We have to start believing in ourselves that we can do it. And we don't need any approval from these people, because they always want us to present ourselves like we cannot do anything without them. And that is the narrative they have created. And that is the narrative other people bought into it. And that is why we, those in democratic elected, we are seeing our leaders always trying to get validation from these people. And they always want these people to praise them, because they have made it clear to us that before we can do anything, it must be per their standard and not our standard. And that is why a lot of us, even in Africa, bought into the narrative that everything must be of the European standard, of American standard. We are not measuring anything per the African standard. And if we continue this way, how far will we go? If we continue this way, will we get to our destination? This is the time. We are in the 21st century. We need to decolonize our mentality, and not in speech, but in actions. We need to start valuing ourselves and supporting the leaders that are doing everything possible to set us free. And we must not fold our arms. Like Bob Marley said, for how long must we stand aloof and watch while they take out our profits? So we need to protect the leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And this is the only way the African can be free. United we stand, divided we fall. And united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great. for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world. In Europe, in France,